Hey students, welcome to Math Lesson 9-2. Today we are going to talk about putting fractions in the simplest form. Now this is a continuation of Lesson 9-1 when we were making equivalent fractions, fractions that are equal or have the same value, but with different numerators and denominators. Just to give you a refresher from yesterday's lesson, we would take a fraction like a fraction like 1/2, and we would multiply the numerator and denominator by the same non-zero number. Let's say 5/5 here. Multiply it by 5/5. Remember, 5/5 equals 1, so 1/2 times 5/5 equals 5/10. So we would say that 1/2 equals 5/10. We're going to do the same thing today when we find fractions in their simplest form, and in fact 1/2 is 5/10 in its simplest form, and I'm going to show you how to do that today. So how do we do it? Well, we divide. Whenever you look for fractions in the simplest form, you are always going to divide. You're going to find an equivalent fraction by dividing. And the first thing you need to do, the first thing I'm going to do here is talk about the definition of a fraction in its simplest form. So what does simplest form mean? Well, a fraction is in its simplest form when its numerator and denominator have no common factors other than 1. And remember, a factor is a number that we multiply to get a product. So in the math sentence 3 times 2 equals 6, our factors are the 3 and the 2. So a factor factors are numbers that we multiply to get a product. So if we look at the example on the right over here, the example talks about this stained glass window. There are 20 total panes of glass, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And it talks about how 12 of these panes are yellow. Or in other words, 12/20ths of the panes of glass, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12/20ths are yellow. Well, it talks about how we can also show that it's not just 12/20ths that are yellow. We can also say that 1, 2, 3 out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? I can break this up like this. Now I have 3 out of 5 panes that are yellow. Right here. So we can say that 12/20ths and 3/5 are equivalent. So 12/20ths is equal to 3/5. And 3/5 is actually 12/20ths in its simplest form. And what we do is we divide to find an equivalent fraction. If you look down here, what they did is they divided both 12 and 20 by 2. Since both 12 and 20 are even numbers, we know we can divide it by 2. So 12 divided by 2 is 6, 20 divided by 2 is 8, and I see that I still have even numbers, which means that I can divide it by 2 again. So I'm going to divide 6 by 2 and get 3, and 10 by 2 to get 5. Remember, this is very important. I know I stressed this in the last video. The reason we can divide it by 2/2 is because 2/2 equals 1. Remember, 3/3 equals 1 whole. All right. Down here, again, we divided 6/10 by 2/2, and we got 3/5. 3 and 5 are not even numbers, so we cannot divide them by 2. And they're pretty close together, which means we're pretty sure we can't divide it by any more numbers. But there is definitely a way to know how to do this. There is a way to check to make sure that 3 and 5 have no more common factors. All right, and a common factor is a number that can be divided, that you can divide both the numerator and the denominator by. All right, so how do you do that? Well, in order to do that, you need to find the greatest common factor, also known as the GCF. GCF. We are going to do that on our guided practice. You will be awesome at finding the greatest common factor in mere minutes. Here we go. So let's look at our guided practice. What we're going to do for each one of these fractions is put them in the simplest form. And the easiest way to put these in simplest form is to do some work first. So we're going to have to chop some wood and carry some water before we get to our simplest form of our fractions. Alright, so the first thing I always do when I'm looking to put fractions in the simplest form is I list off all the factors of each number. So I make a 16, my fraction here is 16/32. So I take the numerator, 16, and I list out all the factors of 16, and I make what we call a factor rainbow. I put a 1 over here, I put the 16 over here, and I draw a big line over the top to connect them, to let myself know that 1 times 6 equals 1 times 16 equals 16. Then I know the next number is 2. 16 is an even number, so I know I can multiply 2 by something to get it. And 2 times 8 is 16. I ask myself, is there a number I can multiply 3 by to get 16? Let's see, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. Nope, let's try 4. 4 times 2 is 8, times 3 is 12, times 4 is 16. Oh yeah, 4 times itself. So with that, I simply put the 4 in the middle and draw a little thing connecting itself to itself. So connecting 4 to 4. Then what I do is list all my factors for 32. I know that easiest one to do all the time is 1. 1 times 32. Alright? Then it's an even number, so I know I can multiply 2 by something to get it. Well, what do I multiply 2 by to get 32? You might need to use a hundreds chart for this, or you can simply do some division. You can take 32 and divide it by 2 and do your math that way. Well, I know my math facts for 16, so I know that 2 times 16 equals 32. And then I know that 3 can't go into 32 because I checked my multiplication table. Then I tried 4. I know my math facts for 4. 4 times 8 equals 32. Then I ask myself, does 5 go into 32? And I know it doesn't because I know that every number, every product of 5 ends with either 5 or 0. I can check 6, but I know that's not it because 6 times 5 is 30 and 6 times 6 is 36. I know it's not 7, and I already did 8, so I know that I am done. Now what I do is look for the number that is the greatest number that is in both factor rainbows. So I look at the greatest number in my factor rainbow of 16, and it is 16 itself. All right. I look down below, and I have 16 down here as well. So my greatest common factor, for 16 and 32 is 16. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to divide 16/32 by 16 16ths. And I'm going to find the fraction 16/32 in its simplest form. Alright? 16 divided by 16 is 1. 32 divided by 16 is 2. So 16/32 in simplest form is 1/2. Okay, so then I go to number 2. And my fraction here is 10/14. Again, these are two even numbers, so I could do what the front side of this, the top of this page where it goes through the problem with you. I could divide it by 2 halves if I wanted to right away, and I could possibly have to do this over and over and over and over again. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to find the greatest common factors. As you can see, I did it already down here. I took 10 and I listed out all the factors of 10. 1 and 10. 2 and 5. And there are no other factors of 10. Then what I did is I took my factors, I took 14 and found all the factors of 14. 1 and 14, 2 and 7. And I looked at my multiplication chart, and there are no other numbers that go into 14. So then I look at both of my lists of factors, 1, 2, 5, 10, 1, 2, 7, 14. And I look at the 10 first, because that's the smallest, that's the least number here. And if 10 is also in 14, that would be my greatest common factor, but 10 is not in the list of 14. Then I look at the number 5. Well, 5 is not a factor of 14, so it's definitely not 10, it's definitely not 5. Then I look at 2. I look down at my factors of 14, oh, and there it is. So, my greatest common factor for 10/14 is 2. So what I'm going to do is find an equivalent fraction for 10/14 by dividing it by 2 halves. Again, I can divide by 2 halves because it's just like dividing by 1. I'm going to get a fraction with the same value. It's just going to have different numbers as a numerator and denominator. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. 14 divided by 2 is 7. So my fraction 10/14 in its simplest form is 5/7. Let's go on to number 3. I have 33/77. Oh my goodness, that is a difficult looking fraction. Well, it kind of is, but take one part of the fraction at a time. So let's take the numerator first, 33. I'm going to list out all the factors of 33. I have 1 and 33. I know that 2 doesn't go into 33 because 33 is not an even number. 3 can go into 33 because 3 times 11 is 33. Now I'll go on to 4, and definitely 4 does not go into it. 5 doesn't go into 33. Does 6 go into 33? Let's think here. 6 times 5 is 30, and 6 times 6 is 36, so 6 doesn't go into 33. 7, let's see, 7, we have 28. 7 times 4 is 28. 7 times 5 is 35, so nope, that doesn't go in there either. 8, nope. 9, no. 10, no. And then I get to 11, and I can stop because I've already used 11, so there are no more to use. So my 4 factors of 33 are 1, 3, 11, and 33. Let's go to 77. Well, always the easiest one, 1 times 77. 2 doesn't go into 77. Does 3 go into 77? Well, let's look here. Take 77, divide it by 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 1, bring the 7 down. 3 does not go into 17 evenly, but that comes close to 5. 5 times 3 is 15. 2, I get a remainder 2. So if it has a remainder or a decimal, it doesn't work. And to save you all some time, 4 doesn't go into 77. 5 doesn't go into 77. 6 doesn't go into 77. But 7 does. 7 times 11. And 8, 9, and 10 do not go into 77, so there are my list of factors for 33 and 77. So I'm going to look at my numerator and start with 33, and I'm going to look to see if I'm going to start with the greatest factor of 33, which is 33. I'm going to go down my list on the denominator and see if 33 is in that list, and it is not, so I'm going to cross out the 33. Then I go to 11. My next greatest factor of 33. I look down the list, and do I see 11? Oh, yes I do. So I'm going to circle the 11 in each list of factors, each factor rainbow, and I know that my greatest common factor equals 11. So what am I going to do with 33/77 in order to make it in its simplest form? I'm going to divide it by 11 elevenths, because 11 elevenths equals 1. And when I do this, 33 divided by 11 is 3. 77 divided by 11 equals 7. So 33/77 in its simplest form is 3/7. Let's go down to the next one. We have 4, 5, and 6 here. We have 16/20ths, 3/40ths, and 10/15ths. Now the first thing we're going to have to do here is make our list of factors and make our factor rainbows for each one. Alright? So this could take a little bit of time. So I'm going to actually have you pause the video, try to solve numbers 4, 5, and 6 on your own, and then when you've done that, you can unpause the video. You'll see the answers. I'll go through it with you quickly. Check your answers. If you didn't get them correct, make the corrections. You can always rewind the video or come back and see me for help. But at this point, pause the video, try to solve numbers 4, 5, and 6 on your own. Again, the first thing you're going to do is find your factor rainbows for all these numbers first. Okay? And then you're going to look for the greatest common factors, greatest common factor, and your greatest common factor here. And then you will divide your fraction, both the numerator and denominator, by whatever you find your greatest common factor to be. So pause the video, solve these problems. When you press play, you'll see the answers. Alright students, so as you can see, I made my factor rainbows down here. That's the first step. You want to make sure you get your factor rainbows down. Kind of hard to see. When you get bigger numbers like 30 and 40, you kind of want to make these rainbows stretch out a little bit further because there's a chance that you could have a lot of different factors in there. One nice thing is if you look, 16 was one of my factors down here, but it was also a factor up here. So I had my factor rainbow already done. I just had to copy it from up there. I also had 10 right here and 10 right here. So think about that when you're doing your work. You don't have to always start from scratch. You might have done that work somewhere else and see if you and use your resources that you already created. Okay, so number 4, I have 16/20ths, and I found that my greatest common factor here, let's see, I have 16 here, but it's not down there. I have 8 up here, but it's not down there, so it's not 16. Oops. Did this to me again. Alright, it's not 16, it's not 8, it is actually 4, because I have 4 right here and 4 right here. My greatest common factor is 4, which means I divide 16/20ths by 4/4, and I get 4/5, because 16 divided by 4 is 4, 20 divided by 4 is 5. 4/5 is 16/20ths in its simplest form. Go to number 5. I made my factor rainbows again. So I look at 30 first, since it's the greatest number in my numerator, and I don't see 30 down here. I go to 15, and I don't see 15 down here. I have 10 right here, and I do see 10 right there, so I'm going to circle my 10 there and my 10 there. So my greatest common factor for 30 and 40 is 10, which means I will divide both the 30 and the 40 by 10, which is 10/10ths. 30 divided by 10 is 3. Oops. 40 divided by 10 is 4. My fraction in simplest form is 3/4. And finally, going over to number 6, I have 10/15ths. 1, 2, 5, and 10. 10 is my greatest number, so I'm going to look down here and see if there's 10, and there is not. 5 is my next one, and there it is. It shows up in both. It is the greatest factor that is in both 10 and 15. My greatest common factor, 5. 10/15ths divided by 5/5 equals 2/3. Alright, so that is how you find fractions in their simplest form, or how you put fractions in their simplest form. Now your practice work today is going to ask you to do the same thing. It's going to give you a fraction, and it's going to ask you to do it in its simplest form. So remember, step 1, put your make factor rainbows. Factor rainbows. Alright? You need to make the factor rainbows. Take your time and do it. You'll be happy you did. If you don't make the factor rainbows, you might come up with an equivalent fraction, but not in its simplest form. I'll make you do it again. So take your time and make your factor rainbows. You can use your multiplication tables. If you really want to use a calculator, you could do that too. But I do want to see your factor rainbows. Then you divide the numerator and denominator by the greatest common factor as a fraction. So if our greatest common factor is 4, I'm going to divide 16/20ths by 4/4. Do that and you'll find your fraction in its simplest form. Again, you can rewind the video, pause the video, fast forward to the video, watch only part of it again, or come and see me for help. Good luck.